It's a funny thing. Sometimes, all it takes is the smell of apple pie, just out the oven, crust all golden, cinnamon thick in the air, and I'm back in 1961. Hope, Arkansas, early September. Hot enough to make a preacher sweat. I was 25, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about love. Land sakes alive. I didn't know a thing. I can still see the sunlight on that linoleum kitchen floor. Clifford was out back fiddling with the Buick, radio humming some old Conway Twitty tune, and I was rolling dough with my mama's old pin, the one with the chipped handle. I remember I had on my green apron, the one with the ruffle. That afternoon felt ordinary, like so many before it. But honey, I'll tell you what, that was the night my heart learned how to break quiet. Sometimes I think memories got their own will. They sit quiet for years, and then something small, a sound, a song, a smell, unlocks a door you didn't even know was still locked. And tonight, well, that pie did it. Set something loose in me. I reckon there's a story I've been keeping tucked away all these years. Not out of shame, no, not that. Just, it's one of those stories that settles deep, gets down in your bones and stays there. But lately, I've been thinking maybe it's time I let it breathe. Clifford Hopper, my husband for near on 3 decades. We met in church when I was 17 and he was fixin' the pastor's pickup. Had grease on his hands and mischief in his grin. Lord have mercy, that boy could make an engine sing. And back then, my heart too. We got married young, like folks did. Started our life in a little white house with a screen door that always slammed too loud. Built a home, raised our babies, paid our bills, and said our prayers. But there was a time, long, drawn out like a bad storm, when love didn't feel like love no more. When I'd watch him walk through that door, smell gas and motor oil on his jacket, and wonder where else that scent had been. Folks talk about heartbreak like it's loud. Mine wasn't. Mine was quiet, like a faucet that won't stop dripping at night. You don't think much of it at first, till you realize you ain't slept in weeks. And yet, I stayed. We made do with what we had. That was just the way things were back then. You didn't air out dirty laundry. You kept house, you kept quiet, and you kept hurt folded up neat, like church linens. For the kids, I told myself. For the town. For the promise we made when we were just 2 dumb kids thinking forever meant easy. Now I ain't here to give advice. You young folks wouldn't understand, not unless life's already given you your own kind of bitter tea. But maybe there's something in my story you'll see a bit of yourself in. Maybe not. Either way, tonight I want to tell the truth, my truth. 'Cause here I am, 89 years old, rockin' on this porch, listening to the crickets sing, and the one thing that still keeps me awake some nights ain't the arthritis or the creaking boards. It's that question. Did I do right, Stan? Or did I just get too good at holding on to things I should have let go? So pull up a chair, sugar, pour a glass of sweet tea, and just listen a spell. I'm gonna take you back to that night in 1961 before the lie had a name. Before the silence moved in. Back when the pie was still warm and I was still a girl believing love was enough. Back in my day, Hope, Arkansas was just a little town where everybody knew your business before you even finished doing it. We didn't have much, didn't have a pot to pee in, as my daddy liked to say, but we had gardens full of tomatoes, porches full of stories, and hearts that beat steady through hard years. I was born in 1936, right in the thick of the Dust Bowl, though Mama said we got more wind than dust. I grew up in a house with 3 sisters, 1 bathroom, and a mama who believed in God, biscuits, and discipline, in that order. Life moved slower back then. We hung our washout on the line, boiled our coffee on the stove, and went barefoot most summers till school came calling. I remember Sunday mornings smelling like starch and hairspray, and evenings filled with whip-poor-wills and the screen door slamming behind my brother Tommy. He always ran ahead. I was the quiet one, always watching, always listening. The kind of girl who knew how to keep a secret even before she knew what one was. I believed the world was good, mostly. I believed grown folks told the truth and that kindness would come back around if you waited long enough. And I believed, with all the fragile might of a little girl's heart, that love was simple. That if someone held your hand and looked you in the eye, they meant it. Lord, how little I knew. Mama used to tell me, Inez Louise, you got the soul of a church hymn, soft but deep. I didn't quite understand that till I got older, but I carried her words like a handkerchief in my pocket, always there when I needed them. She taught me how to cook, how to pray, and how to stand real still when life wanted to knock you over. Daddy worked the railroad till his back gave out. After that, he'd sit out on the porch most evenings, wearing the same blue cap, whittling with like it owed him money. He didn't say much, but when he did, you listened. He believed in hard work and second chances. Maybe that's where I got it from. When I was about 15, I started looking at boys different. Not out of fastness, mind you. Just curiosity. Clifford Harper was the first boy to make my stomach feel funny. He was 2 years older, lean with long arms and a half smile that always made you feel like he knew something you didn't. He'd walk by my house on his way to the garage, always kicking pebbles, humming some Hank Williams tune. One day, he tipped his cap and said, "Mornin', Miss Inez." I swear my knees went soft as butter on cornbread. That's how it starts, you know? Not with fireworks. With a hot tip and a smile. I was 17 when we started courting. Back then, courting meant sitting on the porch with a chaperone and a whole lot of nerves. Clifford brought me wildflowers once. They wilted before I could get 'em in water, but I kept 'em anyway. Pressed 'em in my Bible. I still got 'em somewhere. Dry as bones, but still holding color. At 18, I married him in the same church where Mama was baptized. I wore a borrowed dress, and the whole congregation sang, "What a friend we have in Jesus." It wasn't fancy, but it was real. And I truly thought, that was the beginning of forever. I believed, right down to my stockings, that if two people meant well, they'd make it. That love, once planted, just kept growing. No one told me about droughts. No one told me about weeds. But I was full of hope, not just the town, but the feeling, hope that we'd be different. That the stories you heard about men wandering didn't live on our side of the tracks. That if you worked hard, said your prayers, and didn't sauce the Lord, you'd be spared the heartbreak. That was the girl I was. And I think about her sometimes, the way she smiled without worry, the way she leaned into love like it would always catch her. She didn't know what was coming, but Lord, she had faith. And maybe that's what carried me through when everything else came undone. It started small, like all big things do. A shift you don't feel till the whole house leans with it. I was 32 that summer. Hotter than usual, even for Arkansas. Clifford had just taken extra hours down at the shop, said the new manager was cracking the whip, and he needed the overtime. I made do with what we had, kept busy with the kids, the garden, and Sunday choir. But there was a tension in the air I couldn't name, like the kind you feel before a thunderstorm. The kind that makes the birds go quiet. Now, there was this gas station out on Route 4, not far from the garage where Clifford worked. Nothing fancy, just 2 pumps, a Pepsi cooler, and a little window where they sold fried pies that tasted like regret and lard. I'd stopped there plenty over the years, but I hadn't noticed her before. Not till that Thursday. I remember I was driving back from the feed store, kids in the back, windows down, when I saw her, standing behind the counter with a rag in her hand, staring out at the road like she was waiting on something or someone. Her name was Delilah. I didn't know that yet, but I knew the look in her eyes. I'd seen it once before, in the mirror, the first year Clifford and I were courting. That look of expectant. She was maybe 30, give or take. Pretty in that powdery way. Red lipstick a little too bright for daytime, hair up in a twist, blouse tucked in just so. The kind of woman who always smelled like perfume, even near a gas pump. And there was something else, a stillness about her. Not shy, just calculated. Like she measured her steps. Like she already knew more than she let on. I waved polite, like any decent woman would. She nodded back, but just barely. And I don't know why, but my heart thudded funny, right there in my chest. I couldn't explain it, but something in me stirred. Like the air got thicker. Like my bones knew before my mind did. Weeks passed. I saw her again, and again. Once, Clifford came home with a cherry soda he said a new girl at the station gave him for free on account of the heat. I didn't ask questions. Not at first. What kind of wife does when you've got laundry on the line and potatoes boiling? You tell yourself it's nothing, that you're being silly, that this is the man who danced with you barefoot in the kitchen, who built a crib with his bare hands. But the signs came soft and sure. He stayed later, talked less, shaved on Sundays even when we weren't going to church. One night, I found a matchbook in his pocket with Hope Gas Company scribbled on it in curly handwriting. I sat on the edge of our bed, turning that little thing over and over in my palm like it was gonna answer me. I didn't say a word to him. Not then. That's how we did it in those days. You didn't confront. You waited. You watched. You hurt in silence. But deep down I knew. Maybe I'd known the moment I saw her. And the strange thing was, I didn't hate her. Not yet. I was curious. What did she see in him? What did he see in her that he stopped seeing in me? I remember thinking, is this how it starts? A smile over a soda? A name remembered too easily? That was the moment, the crack in the glass. Just a sliver, but it changed how I saw everything after. Not with rage. Not even fear. Just a slow, sinking knowing. And that's when the girl I used to be, full of faith and forever, started to disappear. I wasn't her no more. I was a wife with questions she wasn't supposed to ask. And a feeling she couldn't shake. The hardest part of hunting is when you can't say it out loud. Not to him, not to your mama, not even to yourself. It just sits inside you like heavy laundry you never quite hang up. That summer turned to fall, and the days got shorter, but those evenings, Lord have mercy, they stretched on like sorrow with no end. Clifford was still coming home most nights, sure, but he left pieces of himself elsewhere. Somewhere off Route 4, behind that dusty station window, where Delilah stood handing out sodas and secrets. At first, I tried to pretend. I set the table like always, made his sweet tea just how he liked it, 2 sugars, no lemon. The kids didn't know nothing, and I aimed to keep it that way. I smiled through Sunday service, wore my best dress to the grocery store. In a town like Hope, appearances were half your salvation. The other half, endurance. And Lord, did I endure. But inside, I was sinking. I couldn't sleep right, couldn't eat without tasting shame. Some mornings I'd wake up with my jaw clenched so tight, I'd have to rub it for minutes just to speak. And still, I said nothing. I was scared, you see, not just of losing him, but of what would happen if I didn't. I'd grown up being told a good wife holds her home together, even when the roof starts to leak. That was just the way things were back then. Women didn't leave. They didn't shout. They didn't ask for better. They made do. The only one who ever noticed something was wrong was my sister Lila. She came by one afternoon with a pie she always baked when something was on her mind. She looked me square in the face and said, "Inez, you look like you ain't been breathing right." I laughed it off, said the garden was keeping me tired. But my hands shook when I sliced that pie, and she saw it. She reached over, touched my wrist, real soft, and whispered, "Whatever it is, you don't gotta carry it alone." But even then, I couldn't tell her. I didn't know how to put it into words that wouldn't break me wide open. I think the worst of it was the not knowing. I didn't have proof, not really. Just a growing pile of empty spaces where warmth used to be. Clifford never hit me, never raised his voice. But absence can bruise just the same. Some nights he'd come home with cologne on him that I didn't own. Said it was from the shop. Some customer left a bottle in the bathroom. I nodded, stirred the beans, pretended I believed him. But every lie he told, I felt like I was the one disappearing. And the town? Oh, hope has ears sharper than a fox. I'd catch glances at the market, hear whispers that quieted when I walked past. One Sunday after service, old Mrs. Langley leaned over in the pew and said, "Men'll be men, child. You just keep praying, Dot." That's when I knew they knew. And still, nobody said it out loud. Not him. Not her. Not me. I started to ask myself questions I didn't like the answers to. What if he leaves? What if he doesn't? What if I'm just not enough anymore? But the one that scared me most was this. Who am I if I stop pretending? And so, the silence grew. Around the dinner table, between the bed sheets, inside my soul. It stretched out like a second skin, invisible, but always there. And I wore it, day after day, because leaving felt like losing my whole world. And Stan? Well, that felt like losing myself. That was the beginning of the real dilemma. Not whether I could forgive him, but whether I could keep forgiving myself for staying quiet. It was November, cold enough the window panes started sweating by sundown. The kids were already grown by then, half out the house, half too busy to notice their mama walking around like a ghost in an apron. I'd made stew that night. The kind Clifford always liked: beef, carrots, black pepper, so strong it cleared your sinuses. I lit the good candle, the one I saved for company. I don't even know why. Just, some part of me still wanted to believe. But the clock kept ticking. 7 turned to 8. 8 turned to 10. I called the garage, but no one answered. Called Lila, just to hear a voice that wasn't my own. She said maybe he was tired. Maybe he went to get a bite. But I knew. Lord help me, I knew. I sat there at that table, watching the stew go cold. The silence was so loud it felt like it was breathing. I remember looking up at the clock, that old one with the brass hands and the soft chime. It said 10:47 when it stopped. I don't mean it ran down. I mean it stopped. Dead. No more ticking. Like even time didn't want to keep going after that. I waited till midnight. Then 1. I sat in that chair, wrapped in an Afghan mama crocheted, rocking back and forth like grief was already here, though I couldn't name it yet. And then, just past 2, headlights lit up the curtains. He came in quiet, smelled like cheap perfume and gasoline. Wouldn't meet my eyes. Just set his keys down, went to take off his boots. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, heartbreaking, hands shaking, so bad I had to hold M tight to keep from reaching for him. And I asked, just once, "Where were you?" He didn't lie. Didn't say a word. Just looked at me like a child caught stealing. His lips parted, but nothing came. And I swear to you, in that moment, I saw every lie he'd never said come rushing out in silence. My knees gave. I sat right down on the floor. Didn't cry. Not at first. Just sat there, rocking a little, like maybe if I rocked hard enough, I could shake loose the hurt. He knelt down beside me. And, for the first time in 4 years, he reached for my hand. I pulled away. I said, "You think I didn't know?" He whispered, "I never meant to." And I cut him off. Don't make this smaller than it is." That was the night something broke. not our marriage. That had been cracking a long while. No, what broke was the spell. The spell that said I had to be silent, that I had to carry his sins just to keep our family looking whole, that my pain was less important than his comfort. I realized I'd been disappearing piece by piece just so he could stay whole. And that night, that cold, still, God-forsaken night, I finally said it. You don't get to do this and still be my home. He cried then. Real tears. The kind that come from deep down when a man knows he's lost something he can't fix. I didn't leave. Not right then. But I changed. I slept in the guest room for 3 weeks. I cooked for myself. I stopped wearing his name like it was a badge of honor. And for the first time in decades, I started listening to the quiet, not running from it. That night didn't end our story, but it rewrote the middle. From that moment on, we weren't pretending anymore. We were two people living with truth between us. And truth, as it turns out, is a heavy thing, but not as heavy as silence. After a storm, everything looks the same, but nothing feels the same. That's how it was in our house. The furniture was still where I left it. The floors still creaked in the same places. Clifford still took his coffee black, but something in the air had changed. It wasn't angry, not anymore. It was just hollow, like we were living in the memory of what we used to be. Those weeks after the night he didn't come home, I moved through the house like a ghost wearing my own skin. I kept busy, folded sheets, wiped counters that were already clean, swept porches just to hear the sound of the broom. I guess I thought if I kept my hands moving, my heart wouldn't cave in. But Lord, that house was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the kind that presses on your ears, makes you feel like you're underwater. He tried, in his way, brought me gardenias once, sat at the table longer than usual, watched me across the room like a man looking for something he lost. But I wasn't angry no more. I wasn't anything. I'd run out of fire. All I had left was ashes. There's a kind of sorrow that don't cry. It just settles into your bones, changes the way you carry yourself. I stopped humming while I cooked. Stopped reading before bed. Stopped looking in the mirror, 'cause I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She had tired eyes and a set jaw, not the girl who once danced barefoot on the linoleum. I started going on long walks, just me and the gravel roads, crunching under my shoes. I'd walk past the church, past the old schoolhouse, all the way out to the creek where Clifford first kissed me. Funny thing was, I couldn't even picture that day anymore. Not clearly, like the memory had faded at the edges, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. My faith, well, that changed too. I still believed in God, but not in the same way. Before, I thought prayers were like coins in a jar. You put in enough, and someday you'd get what you hoped for. After everything, I stopped praying for answers. I just prayed for quiet. Not the silence of hurt, but the kind that lets your heart rest. There were days I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. If I'd ever laugh without hearing the echo of what we lost. Clifford kept showing up every day, every meal, every moment. Not leaving, but not closing the gap either. He'd brush my shoulder in the kitchen, and I'd flinch like a stranger touched me. He noticed, and bless him, he didn't push. We just lived beside each other, like old trees growing side by side, roots tangled beneath, but bark never touching. And I started to skin myself. What's left when love lets you down? When trust don't hold like it used to? Who am I now if not the woman who believed forever meant safe? But even in all that, I never hated him. I couldn't. I'd known every version of that man, the boy with grease on his jeans, the young father reading bedtime stories, the tired mechanic whose hands trembled in church. He broke something in me, but he wasn't just the break. He was all the years before it too. So I stayed. Not because I was weak. Not because I didn't know better. But because I needed to see what came after the silence. I needed to know if anything good could grow where pain had lived. Turns out, sometimes it does. But not quickly, and not without cost. I never went back to being that girl. She was gone. But I became someone else. Someone quieter. Stronger, maybe. Or just more honest. And in that quiet, I started learning to forgive. Not him. Not yet. Me. There's a strange thing about hope. It don't usually come knocking loud. No, it slips in like the first breeze of spring after a long, hard winter. I remember one particular morning, sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, watching the sun stretch its arms across the fields. Clifford was in the garage, tinkering with that old Chevy like he always did, but for once, I wasn't dreading the sound of the radio crackling. I was just quiet. That day, I found myself thinking about Mrs. Thompson down the street. Sweet woman, widowed years before me, always had a smile and a garden full of marigolds. She was battling her own troubles, arthritis that kept her hands from working right, and the loneliness that comes when folks stop knocking on your door. So, on a whim, I took her some of my cornbread and sat with her on the porch swing. We didn't say much at first, but sometimes, just sitting beside someone, sharing the silence, is all the healing you need. Helping her, it sparked something. A little flame I didn't know was still burning in me. I realized maybe the hurt I carried wasn't just for me to bear. Maybe I could use it to reach out, to mend some brokenness, even if mine was still raw. That afternoon, I started volunteering at the church kitchen. Small thing, sure, but it gave me a purpose beyond my own four walls and four walls of pain. And Clifford, well, he noticed the change. Not right away, but he noticed. One evening, he asked me if I'd like to take a walk, just the two of us. I hesitated, old fears wrapped around my heart like chains, but I said yes. That walk was slow and quiet, but it was something. Something new. Something like a beginning. I started to see Clifford not just as the man who'd broken my trust, but as the man who'd been lost in his own struggles. Not that it excused what happened, but it gave me space to breathe, to think about forgiveness not as a gift for him, but as freedom for me. I won't lie, the road wasn't easy. There were days I wanted to crawl back into the silence, days when the weight of years pressed down so heavy it nearly crushed me. But little by little, I found strength in small joys, the smell of fresh-baked bread, the sound of children laughing, the feel of the sun on my face. I learned to forgive myself for staying, to forgive Clifford for his mistakes, and most importantly, to forgive the life that wasn't what I dreamed, but what I lived. And that forgiveness, it wasn't about forgetting. It was about letting go of the anger, the bitterness, the hurt that had settled in like dust. That's when hope found me again. Not with fanfare, but with a whisper. A whisper that said, you can still find peace. You can still find joy. And so I did. Step by step, moment by moment, I took that second chance, not just with Clifford, but with myself. You know, sometimes the hardest part ain't the hurt, it's what you do with it. I carried those years like a stone in my pocket, heavy and silent, keeping it close so it wouldn't roll away. But one day, I realized that stone was weighing me down more than any sorrow ever could. It was time to let go. I was sitting on the porch one afternoon, holding that old photograph, Clifford and me, at the county fair, long before the silence settled in. The picture was faded, edges curled like an old letter. I turned it face down on the table. It was the first time in a long while I didn't feel the sting when I saw him. That day, I chose to remember the love that was, not the pain that came after. I decided to burn the matchbook. the one I'd found all those years ago in his pocket. It wasn't about Eris and what happened. No, it was about taking back the power those small things held over me. I lit the kitchen candle, watched the flames catch the paper, and felt something inside me catch fire too. Not anger, but freedom. I told Clifford, I forgive you. Not 'cause he deserved it, but 'cause I needed it. Needed to free my heart from carrying his mistakes like they were mine. And I told myself, I forgive me. For staying, for hurting, for loving even when it wasn't easy. That forgiveness wasn't a clean break. It was more like slow dawn, gentle, steady, changing the dark to light. I chose to live without grudges, without looking back in bitterness. Not for him, but for me. Because I deserve to be whole, to be at peace. And you know what? Life felt lighter. The house didn't feel so empty. The years ahead didn't seem so scary. I started planting flowers again, marigolds and daisies, in the garden Clifford and I shared. The garden that survived the storms, just like me. I still carry my scars. Some nights, when the house is quiet and the crickets sing, I feel the old ache stir. But it don't own me no more. I'm still here, still standing, still loving life in my own way. I chose to live. Not perfect, not without pain, but with hope, with grace. And I want you to know, if you're carrying a hurt you think will never heal, it can. It just takes time, and a little courage to let go. So here I am, sitting on this porch, at the end of my story, but the start of a new kind of peace. I chose to live beyond the pain. And I'm telling you, you can too. You know, when I was young, I thought life was simple, love was supposed to be easy, forgiveness a given, and a happiness something you just held on to. But now, looking back over these many years, I see things clearer. Life isn't about perfect endings or fairy tale happiness. It's about the mess in between, the heartbreak, the healing, and the moments we almost give up, but don't. I've learned that forgiveness ain't just some fancy word you say when everything's sunshine and roses. No, forgiveness is hard. It's raw and it's real. It's sitting with your pain, looking it in the eye, and choosing to let it go anyway. Not for the one who hurt you, but for yourself, so you don't carry that weight your whole life. Lord have mercy, that was a lesson I had to learn the hard way. Love, too, isn't perfect. It's messy and complicated and sometimes downright painful. But it's also patient. It's quiet in the small things, a touch, a shared silence, a soft word in the dark. Clifford wasn't the man I dreamed of, but he was the man I lived with. And that mattered. That mattered more than I thought it would. I've come to understand that life doesn't owe us justice or fairness. It just is. And what we do with it, the choices we make, that's what defines us. I chose to stay. I chose to forgive. Not because it was easy, but because it was right for me. And maybe that's what I want to say to you, whoever's listening out there. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for perfect healing or for someone else to make it right. Maybe it's time to take your own hand and say, I'm ready to be free. Not free from hurt. No hurt ever really leaves us, but free from the chains of bitterness and regret, because holding on to anger only hurts the one who holds it. I don't mean to say you have to forgive everything. Sometimes forgiveness looks like saying goodbye. Sometimes it means setting boundaries and walking away. But it always means choosing peace. Peace for your heart, your soul, your life. And peace, well, that's worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. It's worth standing in the fire and coming out on the other side, not perfect, but whole. So, if you're hearing my voice sitting with a hurt that feels too big to carry, know this. You're not alone, and you are stronger than you think. The road's long, and sometimes it's dark, but there's light ahead. You just gotta keep walking. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real meaning of forgiveness. Not a destination, but a journey. A quiet walk back to yourself. Well, now, here we are. I've shared a good piece of my heart with you. The joy, the hurt, the silence, and the hope. And I thank you for listening, for sitting with me on this old porch a while. There's something powerful about telling your story, about letting the past breathe again. It reminds us that we're all connected by love, by pain, and by the things we choose to carry with us. I want you to think about something I've wrestled with all my days. Is true love supposed to come back around? Is it meant to circle back like a river finding its way home? Or does it move on, like the seasons, leaving us to pick up the pieces and grow anew? I ain't got all the answers, honey. Maybe I never will. But sometimes, when the night is still and the wind soft on my face, I swear I can feel it, that old love, tucked away like a secret in the breeze. And sometimes, I think maybe Clifford feels it too. Maybe he remembers who we were before the crux, before the silence. But what I do know is this: love ain't just about the big moments, the weddings, the first kisses, the tears. It's in the quiet spaces between. It's in the way you forgive, even when it hurts. It's in the choice to keep your heart open, even when you're scared it'll break again. So I ask you now, in your own life, what's holding you back from forgiving? From leaving behind what weighs heavy? From trusting that maybe, just maybe, love can find you again? I hope you'll take my story and carry it with you, not as a tale of sorrow, but as a gentle reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal, and even the quietest hearts can find their song. Thank you for sitting with me. Thank you for hearing my voice. And if you take one thing from all this, let it be this: you're stronger than you know, and you're never truly alone. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think love is patient enough to wait.